and welcome back everyone to Master Game Design, Unreal Engine 5 Stylized Environment and Third-Person Blueprint course. In the last lesson we polished up this middle section of a building, added a couple of detail, making sure that the rest looks quite alright, just looking around. And now the next step that we're going to do is going to basically be in regards to the gameplay itself. We mainly focused on the visuals. We kind of knew what kind of a setup we're going to do in regards to the player, the overall type of mechanics and whatnot, in regards to the motion that the player needs to, for example, go through here and whatnot. But we're now going to be talking properly about it, making sure that everything works out in regards to the overall setup, and then plan around it in order to enhance the overall map aesthetics and making sure that it works with the game itself. So for us to do that, I'm just going to go ahead and just go to the top-down view, like so. We can make a quick screenshot using a high-resolution screenshot. It actually is quite useful every once in a while. But instead of doing that, I reckon I'm just going to make it a little bit easier for myself at this point and just set up a quick screenshot. And I just realized that these buildings are going to be in the way. I'm going to select all of these buildings and just move it to the side, back to our design area over here. Just going to keep it off to the side like so, and just in case we need them. And now let's go ahead and just reposition the camera, and I'll go ahead and talk about in regards to what we need to basically set ourselves up with. So I'm just going to make a quick screen grab like so, and making sure that it plays both well and it looks nice as well. So yeah, the overall idea is that the player would start over at the docks, over in this section over here. I'm just going to zoom in a little bit. Over at the docks, the main section over here, it would go then to pick up a quest, which is going to need to find an item, and then in this area over here it might be able to find an item, and it would need to go back to this section and unlock the door. So the whole idea is that this wouldn't allow us to get to this section over here. It needs to be able for the player to just have this exploring area, but without it leading it straight to the next section. So we got to make sure that we somehow block this section off. We're going to set up some props in regards to that, just to make sure that we set up this kind of artificial wall over here. I'm just going to go ahead and change the color for that. So we're going to basically have a sort of a blockage over here, and the rest, it should be possible for the player to go all the way around the map. For example, for here we could try out to block off the player over in this section. We also have an issue, for example, with player going into the water and whatnot, so we'll need to, for example, put in a staircase just so the player could come back to the section over here, and the player needs to be able to be blocked off over in this section over here. So these are the props that we need to consider in regards to how we're putting them down. And then the next section is going to be, if I were to just actually zoom over it real quick, going to be this section over here. We're going to go just make actually a quick screenshot, talk a little bit about it. And again, just as we talked previously, this is going to be the next section. This will need a sort of a place to walk in, and since this door is like right in the centerpiece, it will show that this is the path to go to. The door is going to be locked in, which we'll need to find for the player another piece to use. So we need to make sure that we guide the player to the right section, and for us to do that, we'll firstly need to think of all the blocking of the doors. So this area over here, we'll need to consider just blocking off the staircase so it wouldn't just walk off to the distance. We don't need that. We'll need to make sure that we have a sort of a blockage over here as well, to make sure that it's not walkable, playable areas. Remember, this is going to be the previous section type of a blockage, so that's going to be all right. There might be a section where the player would be able to go up the stairs in this case, but we're not going to be worrying about too much in regards to exploiting them for the player, in regards to breaking the game or whatnot. We're just making sure that it's a little bit more clear in which direction for the player to go. This area over here, we need to work on. We need to either block it off, or actually I would say we were talking about setting up an arc. So we're going to be blocking this area over here. So there'd be a sort of an exit, not an exit, but a sort of an entrance over here, maybe for the player to explore a little bit, like a small alleyway in this section over here. And yeah, afterwards, the player should be able to go and unlock the door again and go past this section. And then it's going to be a little bit more interesting, since the reason being is, actually, for some reason, I'm not allowing to be unzoomed. Wasn't letting me to do that. The player should be able to walk past here, and it should be able to go onto the rooftop on this section to get a small parkour section, like a small type of a platformer that will allow you to jump all the way for the rooftops over this section over here to reach the our weapon, basically, to destroy it. So that's going to be the end game of the sorts. So we need to consider the platforming experience for this section. But now, though, I'm going to go ahead and do some planning in regards to that. We can use the cubes of the static meshes that we had previously, or we could even just use primitive shapes, to be honest, for that, to sort out where the shapes, where the player would be able to jump up. We haven't talked about this section either, or blocking this area over here. So we gotta need to make sure we add that in. We're going to basically block this section and block this section over here to make sure that there's no way of accessing these areas as easily, basically. So we'd again lead the player to this section over in the corner. The corner is where I'd like to ideally start the platforming section. And so we got to consider how the platformer is going to interact with the player. So I'm just going to simply use primitive shapes. It's the most basic type of item, and just use some cubes to help us out in order to figure out how the player will interact with jumping. Since we're using the default blueprint, it should be more or less the same in regards to the platforming, jumping, and whatnot. So that's going to be quite all right. We got to now figure out how we can sort that out. And later down the line, we're going to talk about the ways of blocking the path and whatnot with the props. We just need to make sure that the design overall for the rooftop section is basically going to be there. I'm going to go ahead and simply grab another cube. Actually, I'll just set this cube up from here. Maybe then grab another cube and just set it up over here. And yeah, it's up to you really to what kind of a setup you want it to have. I'll imagine this to be like sort of barrels or crates or something of the sort to be held properly by the side. Then afterwards, you'll go onto the side of the roof, for example, making it a little bit more difficult to go on. Something of the sort, and maybe something like this to jump on top, just like that, making sure that the window is not getting overlapped with those items. Again, we're going to be replacing them, but for now, though, we got to make sure that overall jumping experience looks quite nice. Then we got to make sure that it looks quite clear that we need to jump onto the other side of the roof, which can be a little bit difficult to do. But if you set up sort of a lighting, for example, or a couple of props over in this direction, it would be quite clear that you need to jump over in this section. So what I'm going to do is just, I'm going to grab these boxes over here as a simple placeholder, going to grab them and put them off to the side. And this way it's going to be quite clear and quite obvious that a player needs to jump over in this section just to reach higher grounds. So that's going to be quite all right. After confirming that I'm able to jump from that other roof to this rooftop, which again, I'm just going to do just in case, just to making sure that it's not too hard. We can again make this as hard or as easy as we can. This is more of a planning phase, and we got to make sure that it just works out overall. It might be a bit hard to navigate for a player that doesn't know exactly the path of this area. But if we create this sort of a look, it is quite clear that you need to go up to these levels. So let's go ahead and just continue on with this. We're going to go ahead and just simply jump up, go all the way to this area. And for example, we now need to get from this area maybe to this section over here. If the roof was a little bit too high up, we could put another crate over here on the rooftop. And in regards to crates on the rooftops, it might look a little bit out of place, but if we scatter some props, some extra props on the side, it might help us out in regards to just selling that urban area as well. So that's quite all right. This section over here, since we're able to see it from the rooftop, we need to either block it off or do something about it. And the best way for us to do that would be to just simply grab some pieces and just block it off. So I'm going to grab a simple rooftop, the most basic one of a square. It's going to make sure that it doesn't overlap like so, and just put it up like this, and maybe just grab it like so. I think that's going to be quite all right. And maybe we can get ourselves an archway because it looks quite empty otherwise. So I'm going to get an arc like so, a simple arc over in this area, just like that, just to help us break down the overall surface. I'm going to extend it a little bit, not too much, but it wouldn't look out of the way. We could add some bit of a extra barrels or something of the sort to help maybe climb or something like that. And again, from this area, now we got to consider how else we're going to get to basically the weapon over in a distance. So the way we're going to do it is maybe we can just jump down here, and when we jump down here, as you can see, we get stuck. So maybe we could grab a small crate to help us out with that. I'm just going to make sure that I duplicate it here. I'm going to just put it off to the side like so. And there you go. We're going to get ourselves basically not just like a hard stuck in a level. It's not going to be too hard to get up to this part. This section over here might be a little bit more of an interesting one. We totally cannot jump on this area. So what I'm going to do in this particular part is probably I'm just going to grab a small building and just plonk it down in there. So it's going to be nice and easy to work with this section. Like that, I'm going to hold Alt and just going to place it down in that section. And the planning stage is probably pretty much done. Again, it really depends on the difficulty of a platformer that we want to set ourselves up with. But all in all, actually, I need to make sure that in this particular case, visually it quite looks well enough as well. So I might just go put it in a wall. Just going to check how the other side looks like, and yeah, it's totally okay. I'm going to just drag it a little bit more. Drag it lower, something like this. I think it looks quite nice. This does not have a rooftop, so we need to go ahead and fix that. I'm going to real quick grab one of the roofs, just put it up like so, making sure that it doesn't look like a bottomless pit. Like this place has more depth to it in regards to not making it look like it's hollow. And there you go, we got ourselves a nice setup. So for this area, we need to consider now how we can jump from here to the other section. This might be as easy as or as hard as we want it to be, but in general, I'm just going to again use a cube as a sort of a placeholder to place down a platform, and just seeing how this would look like, for example. So maybe like a board or something of the sort, like this. So we'd be able to jump over it. That looks quite all right. Maybe that's just enough, like so. Maybe it needs a bit of an extra just in case. So I might even just grab another one of the sections for this and just place it down over here. Maybe that would be quite all right. Again, we also need to consider how it's going to look like from the base and whatnot, since this is also going to be a playable area. So we gotta check how this looks like, and if it's just the right depends on the props and whatnot. Depending on that, it might look quite all right or it might not. We need to consider what type of props we're using, and also we got to make sure that it doesn't look like you're able to get from here or just going up the thing. We need to make sure that it doesn't bring the focus from the player. So that really again depends on the type of platforms that we're going to use over here. And I'm just going to place another one over here and then give it a final check. And finally, just make sure that we set up with a nice type of a setup in regards to making sure that it looks organized, a little bit more organized. So maybe something like that. I'll just put it like so. So it looks like this is being held down by this crate. This looks quite nice. And there we go. We're going to be able to jump up in this section and get to this part. So yeah, that looks like a pretty nice setup overall. The rest that we need to do is basically we need to just grab all of the cubes and make sure that we put them in one folder so we're able to replace it down the line. I'm going to go ahead and select the first cube, going to hold shift and select the final cube, and I'm just going to make sure that it's everything selected, just maybe even bring it upwards like so, making sure that the first cubes and the last cubes that are created are going to be in here. Going to just create a new folder and call this folder just placeholder, so something of the sort. Placeholders, like so. And yeah, that's pretty much it when it comes to that. In the next lesson, we're going to start working with the props themselves. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll be seeing you in a bit.